We call this special edition Michigan Wolverines live here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. You probably know that we've got a Tuesday night show, also a Thursday night call-in show with the guys talking Michigan football. But appreciate Isaiah Hull stopping by. You can catch his work at Wolverines Wire, also at Locked On Wolverines, and you will see those destinations down below here in just a second. Isaiah, how you doing today?
Doing well. Just kind of can't believe there's another game tomorrow. And I don't think many people, hopefully for the sake of Michigan football, they're thinking of it, which I'm sure they are, because I know that that's not where my head's at the moment.
Yeah. And sometimes, see if you are with me on this one, I will have people comment to me, viewers, callers, etc., that, well, you better not have that type of mindset because you're looking past this team or this team or that team. Well, I'm not going to be out there playing the games. So we can certainly circle the calendar and look forward to this and look forward to that and say, Maryland's a pushover. The team better not be doing that. The coaches better not be doing that, but that's their job. So certainly, yeah, you having your mind on Ohio State, just like most of Wolverine Nation, I think is pretty.
Yeah, I used to get that a lot once upon a time. I used to always get stop talking about this game that's ahead because, this is about to happen, I'm not in the game. I can look at whatever. I can look at a game 5 years from now if I want, right? Like it doesn't affect anything. But yeah, it's just always how that ends up going is you just get a bunch of people who, they get into the mindset of the team for whatever reason. And, I understand it. I mean, try to get in the mindset of the coaches in general, which is kind of how I approach things. But yeah, it's ridiculous. We can look at games that aren't even going to happen, right? Like, let's look ahead to Michigan host, after the first round at college football playoff bye. That's not happening, but I can look at it all I want,
Yeah, let's talk about who Michigan fans would love to play in the national championship game.
Exactly.
As long as that doesn't get into Sharon Moore's head or any of the players, no harm there. While we're talking about fans, I didn't anticipate going this route before we break down the team. Are you of the mindset that generally over the course of the reasonable, knowledgeable end of the spectrum fan to the completely delusional, ridiculous for any fan base, that all fan bases are generally the same? They've got their homers, they've got their super pessimistic, they got their delusional, they got every mix, or that the Michigan fan base in some ways is unique?
No, I think it's like any other fan base. And I'm sure it's not what Michigan fans want to hear, but I've having come from this as someone who was a fan, had to eventually, I know another thing that people don't understand, kill my fandom because otherwise I can't do my job. Doesn't mean I'm not, sometimes optimistic about the way things are looking from time to time. But yeah, I mean, you get the broad spectrum. I mean, I think some fan bases are worse than others when it comes to maybe the vitriol and things that other fan bases might get. Now, granted, I'm not seeing it a lot, what other fan bases are getting from Michigan fans in a lot of ways. Michigan's interesting because it's kind of posited differently than a lot of other schools because at the apex of things that had three rivals, right? Like it's not just Ohio State, it's also Michigan State. And when they play regularly, Notre Dame. And I know, having been at school at Michigan, there were a lot of people that hated Notre Dame more than the other two. I know that sounds like sacrilege to some, but like I knew several people that looked at it that way. They hated Notre Dame more than anybody. But with the three rivals, I mean, and I understand Notre Dame doesn't look at Michigan as its chief rival. USC tends to have that distinction. It's in a different spot than a lot of schools because it's getting it from kind of all sides. Michigan State obviously looks at Michigan as its main rival. Michigan fans generally do not reciprocate that. So I think that because it's got a split focus in some ways, I think Michigan fans tend to care more about Michigan than there are certain Twitter accounts, for instance. I won't even do them the indignity or dignity, I guess, in this case, of mentioning the actual ones, but for some rival schools that they only talk about Michigan. It's like you have the school you claim to root for in your name, but you only talk about Michigan. And I think Michigan fans tend to care most about Michigan and not, they're not sitting there consuming podcasts of other schools, is kind of what I've found. I think that's rare unless it's like in the immediate aftermath of a win or something like that. But generally, though, like, yeah, that every fan base has bad apples. There's a fair share of Michigan fans that hate me for one reason or another. And I'm not saying that those are bad apples. I'm just saying, like, they might want a different type of analysis, and they might get vitriolic right towards their own in that sense. You've got the ones that are just like, we're all here to just have fun. And then you got the doomsayers, and those tend to come out on game day quite heavily. A lot of them end up being in my group texts, in my texts and all of that, and during games. And I'm like, well, do you think I'm going to participate in this? I'm not sure what you're thinking. I'm on the field trying to work. But yeah, I mean, I think that you just get varying degrees and levels depending on the fan base. Like, I think, you're an Ohio State fan. And I think that you are more than perfectly pleasant. There are a lot of Ohio State fans that aren't. And I think sure you get plenty of the Michigan fans that aren't coming towards you. So I think that is where it does end up having the similarities. I don't think Michigan's unique in that sense, as much as I think a lot of Michigan fans wish that it was.
Isaiah, I was able to pull off this podcast for a number of years, and I wish I would have tracked exactly when the news broke that I was an Ohio State fan when I just kind of let it out. But prior to that, I took some pride, regardless of how good anyone thought I was or was not, that people didn't know who I rooted for. Like, I could look at my comments section and see plenty of Ohio State fans who were like, you just hate Ohio State, and making comments. And I would just, of course, internally chuckle because I thought, okay, I must be doing my job. I certainly championed Penn State as getting ripped off in 2016 when Ohio State was given the playoff spot above Penn State. And I produced a video and said, Penn State should have this. They won head to head. They're the Big Ten champion. They should be in the playoffs, and so forth. So I'm going to take some of this from our mutual friend, Steve Dace, because I do agree with this. I can't back it up with metrics or polls or anything like that, but just based on interaction with the fans, that the Ohio State fan base does seem to be more fascinated with Michigan than the Michigan fan base is with Ohio State. And what was kind of odd about that is typically when you stomp a team down for 15 years, you would think that would go away. Like, okay, we've taken care of them, let's move on to somebody else. Or Michigan State or Wisconsin during that time has been more of a problem than Michigan, but it never ceased. And Steve Dace told me on a number of occasions that he actually admired that how in the world are you still obsessed with us after winning 14 out of 15 or whatever the numbers were at one point. But that's not just the fan base. That's in the athletic building, the countdowns to the Michigan games and the X's out, the Michigan, the M's all over campus and all that business, even in the midst of dominating the series. And maybe that's just a Michigan culture of, well, we're kind of above that versus, as again, Steve would liken Ohio State more to a SEC fan base of rabid football first, football only fans.
Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks a lot to what I was saying about Michigan having split attention to some degree. Right. Like Ohio State, even though there were other teams that were competitive, and certainly Penn State kind of rose a little bit to that, but not certainly not the, to the level of vitriol. And it's obviously just increased, I think, for Ohio State fans recently because of the losses to Michigan. And now Michigan fans are able to chirp back. I wonder how much of this was kind of born just from going back to 1969 and forward, right? From Bo Schembechler coming from, directly from Miami of Ohio, but originally from Ohio State, and having that relationship with Woody Hayes. And then, you fast forward to the 90s when Michigan was, mediocre Michigan, and yet still was always beating what seemed to be better John Cooper coach teams kind of on a yearly basis. And then, you get to today, Michigan's winning. And I think that amplifies things. But yeah, you're right. Even before the all of that, like I would see a lot of, and I think there's a lot of people even in the Ohio State media, not to call them out, but that have that type of vitriol as well. And I think that ends up becoming it's I think partially why in a lot of ways this ends up being a toxic relationship, because like, I think that a lot of the Ohio State fans or even Ohio State media think that we in the Michigan media treat it the same way. And generally, like, we don't. Like, you always hear like, oh, these, the Michigan State fans call it the blue wall. And it's like, it's really not that serious, right? Like, even like when it comes to the Michigan Ohio State rivalry, yeah, it's better for business for Michigan to win that game. It's more enjoyable to cover the team when Michigan wins that game, because of, number one, I don't have to hear it from both Ohio State media or Ohio State fans, because I think Michigan fans are starting to do this now as well, but they weren't kind of until the last couple of years, going after rival media as if they are they're part of the program or something like that. It's a bizarre thing. But I'm starting to see more Michigan fans do the same. But it makes life better and easier. Now, yeah, I mean, it's more fun for me in multiple facets if Michigan wins that game. But more so lately, it's more fun because it's like I can't do anything. And certainly my relationship with Connor Stallions has amplified this. I can't do anything without Ohio State fans in my mentions for one reason or another, with some kind of made up narrative that they like to come up with, or, like I post a picture of my dog and it's just like, you just get a bunch of anger and vitriol. So it's very bizarre, because I just I don't really understand why that happens, because I am of the mindset, maybe it's because I was raised in a Christian school. We won I remember our soccer team won the sportsmanship award. Like, I'm kind of here's a good illustration. I remember at my freshman year at Michigan, 1999, I had a bunch of friends that went to Michigan State. Michigan lost that game, and I immediately called my friend Jason after the game and was like, we'll get you the next one, right? Like, that's like the mentality that I have long had, and that's kind of gone. It's kind of become this, like, Liam Neeson Taken type of mentality when you lose that game for the fan bases. And that I don't think is fun, and I do sense it way more from Ohio State fans than the other way around, but I think it's because it's the galvanizing force in the state of Ohio, right? Because you got the split NFL allegiances. Columbus is smack dab in the middle of the state. It's the one thing everyone can kind of unite behind, is not just Ohio, but also the hate for Michigan, the state rivalry and all of that kind of stuff. Michigan doesn't really, it kind of goes the other way, because like the split allegiances with the colleges, but everyone's got the Lions, the Pistons, the Tigers, all that stuff. So like Michigan and Michigan State fans can coexist outside of the college rivalry. I don't know. I just think fandom in general in college sports has become kind of toxic. I don't particularly like it. Doesn't really matter who it's coming from. That's just kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and this is where I stand on it. I am an Ohio State fan. I expect to be an Ohio State fan the rest of my life. Do I care as much as I once did? Not even close. Like, I don't even know what kind of percentage to put on it. 15% versus the 100% of 25 years ago. Whatever it is, it's minuscule. Do I still care? Am I going to, as soon as I make those kind of comments, Isaiah, then I get comments back that, oh, you're just saying that because you've lost 4 straight games, that you don't care as much. No, I truly don't. Do I still care? Yes. I want Ohio State to win that game more than any other game that they play. I am very upfront about that. And I had to be forthright about this too, going into last year's game, because of the 12-team playoff and knowing Ohio State was going to be in the playoff regardless. I don't try to tell people how to feel. If if the Ohio State Michigan game is just as big and just as meaningful to any particular person, absolutely. I can't tell you how to feel, but the logistics say, depending on the standings, depending on where the teams are ranked, that in certain years, this game will not mean as much tangibly, will not. I'm not talking about emotions or toward a rivalry or pride, but tangibly will not mean as much to one or both teams. And that was the case for one team last year. And I simply said, because of that, I could tell that for me, the edge was off a little bit. Not that I wasn't disappointed, not that I didn't want Ohio State to win, not that I hated losing. I still did, but not like I did in 1988 or 1996, all these other years. It wasn't even close. And some of that comes with aging and, prioritizing other things in life, of course, far more. But that's at least where I stand on it. So I don't want to misrepresent your initial statement. I just want clarification. So do you still consider yourself a Michigan fan who is just able to push that to the side and cover the team objectively?
That's kind of hard to quantify, because I think I'd be lying to my, it would be more to myself than to anyone else if I said that I didn't have a level of fandom. But at the same time, like, maybe it's just I'm better at compartmentalizing, and it's not just the losses, it's the wins too. Michigan won the national championship. I literally turned to whoever was standing next to me before they dropped the confetti and put it up on the scoreboards, and I just said very flat out, just monotone, wow, Michigan won the national championship. And that was like kind of the level of like excitement that I had. I kind of become a person who doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. I think I take more joy out of like the aftermath of rivalry wins. And I think, again, it's more being a little snarky to the people who have decided to come after me personally. I think that was the first thing. Like, yeah, the first win over Ohio State outside of 2011, that felt special to me because I didn't witness it in my, I dropped out of school in 99. I didn't even watch the Michigan Ohio State game in 1999. But I came back to school in 2004 through 2008. So I watched all four of those games, and Michigan lost all four of those. And I was in California for the 2011 game. So I didn't, I watched that from afar, and then covering the team from 2015 forward, I'd never seen Michigan win. So when it became apparent to me about midway through the fourth quarter, Michigan was going to win that game, I mean, I was in the press box, which I'm rarely am, and recognized like I should probably write something. And since I'm actually at a computer instead of down on the sidelines with the camera, and I put my hands out and I was like shaking, and I'm like, oh, it does mean something to me. So I can't say it doesn't mean something. But at the same time, like if Michigan loses that game, I'm not going to come home and lose sleep over it. Right. Like it's not, I got more, I think, generally like, more vitriol and from inside my heart, like in 2016 or 2018, came from not having certain storylines that I wanted to write about, where it seemed like maybe earlier, but either before the game or during the game, I'd be able to, or then joy kind of came more like I remember flying down to the Orange Bowl in 2021 and just reading all the hateful comments I got when I aggregated a 24/7 sports story that said like Michigan's one of their dark horse college football playoff teams. I was on my way to the college football playoff, and it was mostly Ohio State fans that were calling me names. And I was like, I didn't even write this. I just said, hey, 24/7 sports said this. So it's kind of funny because it's like, it's not like the product always. Now, it is a little different too, because I actually know the coaches and the players and stuff like that. Whereas before, when it meant more, I didn't know them. So I can't say it doesn't mean something. It does. It's during the game, especially when things are going one way or the other. Like, I have some sense of the emotion, but like if Michigan wins, I'm not like, it just doesn't matter the way it did before I covered the team, or I should say before the 2016 game, because that was kind of the moment where I recognized I had to kill my fandom, was the 2016 version of the game, because I was too distraught in the aftermath of that I could barely function enough to do my job. So with that, it's like, okay, but this is like how I make my living. I need to find a way to actually be able to be functional. So, with that kind of came like a little bit of a mindset change and a lifestyle change. And, I don't live and breathe it the same way that I did back then. So, kind of the same thing that you say, there's still like a 15% there. It's certainly not 100. It's certainly not what it was before, but that's just kind of also college sports in general too, right? Like sports in general, but college sports with the way that they're, I think, killing the sport with expanded playoff. I think it was just far better, far more exciting, far more meaningful when it was 4 teams. The expanded conferences, even though I'm a big matchup person, I love the idea that you get to play like bigger teams in any given year. I prefer to be able to have Michigan play in Oklahoma in week 2 compared to and lose that game compared to playing some also ran that they're just going to run roughshod all over, just to kind of bring it back to this year and what Michigan is. If Michigan had what would have been like a normal schedule a couple years ago, I mean, they're probably also undefeated going into this week, right? Like, because even though this hasn't been like a team that you would look at and say, yeah, of course they're going to be undefeated going into the Ohio State game. They generally aren't going to have Oklahoma and USC on, a road game at USC on the schedule. If it's more like, okay, well, they're going to play, maybe they wouldn't be undefeated. Indiana's really good, but I think that that part of college football is good that you get more of those, but at the same time, I think it's hard to get up and get excited about it the way that you used to with just the constant changing dynamics of the sport, which feels very corporatist at the top. And I think that kind of ruins it. It's the same reason I think that like I was a huge baseball fan as a child, but then when I think it was 1992 or was it 93, the strike happened.
Yeah.
Even being like 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, I was like, I'm out. It's something happens, I think, to your level of fandom, at least to me, when you start introducing corporatist things into the mix. And I think you're starting to see that. And I think that's probably had an impact on it as well.
It's funny how those things work on many of us, but in different phases in different ways. So for me, I'm older than you. I was still a huge baseball fan, even suffering through a 1981 strike. And the threat of strike was every year deep into spring training. Every year I'd put up with it. And even through 1994, I remember the strike was imminent and I still dragged my wife to Three Rivers Stadium, which was 2.5 hours away because the Indians weren't home, just because I wanted to see a baseball game before they went on strike. Now that's stupid. And then the season didn't even counter any of the games. But about 5-6 years ago, this happened with the NFL. This happened with Major League Baseball with me. It was not a conscious decision. It was just simply, this has become so corporate. It's become so political in ways that I could not support, that it just kind of dropped off and just kind of evaporated, went away.
Yeah. I mean, I used to be I wouldn't consider myself, even though this is my profession, I wouldn't consider myself a sports guy now. Like that, 10, 15 years ago, it was like, all right, I'm home from, whatever my job is. And, what games are there on? Can I watch a Tigers game? Can I watch a Red Wings game? And like, generally, like I watch college football. It's pretty much it. Otherwise, I'm like, what movie can I put on? Now, granted, my degree's in film, so that also makes sense. But, I feel like everything is just got this certain glint about it that has a greed factor to it that, makes the love of the game kind of go cold.
And Isaiah, for as much as I love this topic and I could keep poking your brain on this one, I love this conversation. I'm sure people want us to talk Michigan football. So we do appreciate Blue Wolverine. Thank you so much for the contribution. Hello, Mark and Isaiah. Then we've got Jackson stopping by. Thank you for that, Jackson. For Wolverines Live, may we get an episode where Mark, Steve Dace, and Isaiah Hull join TJ and John in the offseason or before the year ends. I will do my very best to put that together, Jackson, but we cannot guarantee anything. But thank you so much for the interest and for the suggestion. So Hogan Hansen may be available this week or maybe for Ohio State. Can you kind of lean into that situation and also the entire health report on both sides of the ball?
One thing I've learned when it comes to Michigan, and by the way, we've got all the time in the world. I don't really have, but I gotta go for a run while it's warm out. But we can go another 10, 15, 20.
Appreciate it.
But I don't know what to trust when it comes to Michigan and injuries, because like I've said this in previous episodes of Locked On Wolverines, they lie to us all the time, and I'm sure that they'll they don't like me saying that, but I mean, they do that, right? Like they say, oh yeah, this guy's good, and then like you don't see him for the rest of the year. They've been a little bit more forthcoming lately, so but even so, I don't really know whether or not we actually will see Hogan. Like at this point, like I think he's appeared in enough games where he wouldn't be eligible for a red shirt because he's just been kind of out there for like a play or two. It would be helpful because Michigan, they need more production, I think, from the tight end room. And I think for next week, it's kind of an all hands on deck thing. And you'd like to get guys more involved early. It's kind of what my take is on Bryson Kudstall. Like, just not to tangent too much, but same reason why it's like, if Jordan Marshall can go, I don't know that Jordan Marshall should go against Maryland, because I think it's more important to get Bryson Kudstall those snaps. And it'd be the same thing, I think, for Hogan Hansen, because you don't want to, like, last time he had a catch was in week 3 against Central Michigan. And then suddenly you're saying, all right, you play a Central Michigan game, and now we're going to put you in against Ohio State. I think you want to get guys at least back into some kind of rhythm, or into some kind of rhythm in general. So I don't know. I think it would be good, but at the same time, like I would be fine seeing them go with more Zach Marshall, who had that incredible game against Washington. And, anytime he's been kind of out there and targeted from that game forward, because like early in the season, it was kind of like, yeah, he doesn't look like he's ready. And then from that Washington game forward, it's like Zach Marshall comes in, and even Deacon Tonielli as well, who had the kind of good wherewithal against Northwestern to keep his head up and find that one ball that came in the air. And, he was targeted on the one Bryce pick as well. I think that those guys are showing you some things where it's like, you might just look at Hogan Hansen and say, maybe he's a next year thing at this point. Now, maybe he's just not an unknown. He was supposed to be kind of the heir apparent to Colston Loveland, and he's just been unhealthy all year. And, you could come in and be that, like, Ohio State hasn't seen him on film and they can deploy him in ways that they haven't seen. But I think Michigan absolutely, whether it's going to the Zach Marshall and Deacon Tonielli tandem, or a Hogan Hansen that's maybe a little bit more unknown, they need to have more options, especially, maybe not as much this week, but next week, than Andrew Marsh at this point, right? Because I think the cat's out of the bag when it comes to him. And, Ohio State certainly is going to do everything it can to try to slow him down. So you better have other options in the pass game. I mean, obviously Donovan McCulley is one of them. I don't want to rag on the kid, but it would be like kind of malpractice at this point to really do much with Samaj Morgan, unless he comes out in the Maryland game and they try to get him going and he actually does something positive. And, Channing Goodwin, Kendrick Bell, like these are guys that we just really haven't, we saw Channing Goodwin early in the year, and he also was dropping the ball about as much as Samaj was. And but Kendrick Bell, we haven't seen. Peyton O'Leary, who had a big catch against Ohio State last year, we haven't seen at all this year. So I think like you got to figure out some somewhat known commodities that you can feel comfortable going with, because I just don't think that. I think that given the way the Matt Patricia defense has played, like, plays are going to come at a premium, not just points, but plays. And that's a big surprise to me as someone who was a Detroit Lions fan, and watched Matt Patricia. He kind of helped kill my Detroit Lions fandom as well. But that the defense has been as good as it's been. So I think that, yeah, if Hansen's good to go this week, then get him out there, get him acclimated. But if he's not, then I have a hard time saying, like, yeah, throw him to the Wolves against Ohio State. It's kind of hard to say or know how healthy he is or isn't, because it's just, you kind of get the, yeah, he's fine. And then don't see him for 6 weeks after they say he's fine,
Isaiah Hole, Wolverines Wire, Locked On Wolverines daily podcast. Lock it in there. Pardon the pun, but this is the best time of year, if you haven't done so already, to check out Isaiah's work, obviously, with the huge game coming up in about 10 days, or about 8 days to be exact. And of course, Maryland's the opponent this weekend. Michigan just about a 2-touchdown favorite in that one. Now, you talked about proven players, Isaiah. This guy's a proven player, but at this position, I got to say, when I saw Max Bredesen attached to the running back position as a guy that would actually kind of play tailback and get the football, possibly, this is me probably stereotyping, not analyzing Max Bredesen and watching him as an athlete, but putting position and number on him and thinking, how could he possibly play running back for a team that's trying to pull off a big upset and finish off its season and going to a playoff?
You wonder if it's more of like playing the Khalid Hill role from 2016, 2018, type of thing. Sharon Moore was around in 2018 for that. And I'm kind of surprised that, I don't think that they're going to be running like outside zone with Max Bredesen. Maybe, Steve Kasula, who kind of let the cat out of the bag on that one, said, he was a former quarterback. He had 250-ish rushing yards. And, when he was a quarterback, he's a little bit of a different size now than he was when he was a quarterback, right? He's taken on defensive tackles now. So, but even so, I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen him kind of get the ball more on these short yardage situations, right? It would only kind of make sense to have that Mike Allstott, Corey Schlesinger. I mean, even that's what Michigan did with Khalid Hill. We need a yard or two, obviously eventually you had Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum that, it's 3rd and 3. You just know that they're going to get it. Why not give it to the guy who craves contact, especially considering they've had some problems here and there this year. And it's not just limited to the fumble that happened last week. It's, you can think back to a couple other instances, Michigan State game. What's the other one I'm thinking of? Washington, where they go for it on like a 3rd and 1 and don't get it, or a 4th and 1 and don't get it. And, it only tracks to me that they would get the ball in his hands sometimes, he doesn't always have to be a lead blocker, because, at some of those, and maybe another block fails, or, especially when it's a scenario where the other team's crowding the line, they've got all 11 in the box because they know what Michigan's going to do. Well, give it to the guy that's going to try to be able to get through, because he's that tough. I think that tracks. That makes sense. That's kind of what they ask him to do in terms of blocks. So makes sense of him having the ball in his hands. But also, it's one of those things I don't know how much I believe it either, because it's is that something that they're saying, or is that something that they're preparing? Maybe we do see it this week, just to, again, give Ohio State another thing to prepare for when Michigan goes and does something different. That's the fun of having a big rivalry game at the end of the year that not every other team can claim, is you can set things up, you can say things, force the other team to prepare for it. And, maybe you use it, maybe you don't, but if nothing else, maybe the other team spent precious time trying to prepare for what you think it might look like, or what it kind of looks like if you've deployed it once or twice.
I will take the last two guys I wanted to ask you about and segue them together to get you on your way. But I would be remiss, obviously, not to ask about the quarterback position, but also Andrew Marsh, who I had heard amazing things about coming out of high school. We've got a friend, Leanne Herring, who works down in that area and does a lot of scouting and so forth. And she just talked about Andrew Marsh is going to be phenomenal at Michigan, but I didn't expect phenomenal to come the back half of his freshman season. What he and Underwood pulled off, I immediately went to, I don't know if you recall this play, Aaron Rodgers against the Cowboys in the 2016 NFL playoffs, where Aaron Rodgers was sprinting toward the left sideline and made a throw that only he and 2 other guys could make on the planet to put the Packers with seconds left in field goal range to win the game. And maybe this wasn't quite at that level, but considering the age of these two guys and their level of experience and chemistry between each other, just working together through one season, that was a crazy throw and catch that they pulled off against Northwestern late in the game. And obviously Andrew Marsh is he could be just a game changer in taking this mundane offense and raising it to the level where, and maybe this will be a conversation, hopefully, if we get you next week, where Michigan's go-to is obviously the bread and butter is the running game, and they're taking all these hits at the running back position injury-wise. And here's Ohio State that lives off the pass, and their best wide receivers are nicked up. And what that is going to possibly mean. But suddenly Michigan can be explosive, and they almost had 500 yards in a game that was a really exciting game. Michigan was clearly the better team, but obviously was in doubt until the final seconds. But your thoughts about Andrew Marsh, and then obviously Bryce Underwood playing a game where a few glaring mistakes showed up, but in totality, he, to me, just looked the part of, this is who this guy is going to be long term.
Yeah, first off with that play, I mean, that was the gotta have it play at the gotta have it moment and the gotta have it drive. They had a couple gotta have it drives right before that and turned the ball over, and the defense stood tall enough where they were still in it, right? But I mean, I usually don't count on Jeremiah Smith aside. I think that you kind of look at freshman wide receivers and say I don't really count on them that much. Especially at Michigan, right? Because Michigan, it has its own style and brand. They count on so much blocking and things of that nature. It usually takes a year or two before wide receivers show up and start to be able to be functional in the Michigan offense, no matter who's kind of leading it. So it is kind of a surprise, especially because, he was the high end commit in the class, and when it came to wide receiver, but Jamar Browder was the hype beast of spring ball. It was like, oh, this guy's coming down with everything. And we haven't, I don't think he's got a catch yet this year. A couple drops thus far. So, and we haven't even seen Jacob Washington, who's another 6'3" guy. So for Andrew Marsh, who finally kind of mid-season came out and was able to, acclimate and then have that 189-yard performance, and just to be able to have that rapport with Bryce. And I think, that's the type of thing that happens, I guess, when you're in the same class and you can build rapport in a certain way. It's clearly overshadowed what he and Don McCauley were kind of starting to build early mid-season, when it was like, okay, Michigan does have a number one guy. And then Marsh came alive more so from that Washington game forward. It's impressive. And I think what made it most impressive wasn't just like having the play that he had, that the bomb down the sidelines that he caught within the 5-yard line. I was right there in front of him. Having plays like that Michigan hadn't in a little while. They had a little bit with JJ McCarthy and Roman Wilson, or even Cornelius more in 2021, 2020, 2021, but Cornelius Johnson wasn't making those types of plays in 22 or 23. I think that it's good to see that type of rapport, and good to see that they're able to connect on that level, because you just don't really expect that right now from the Michigan offense, which has been, if nothing else, a little bit more dink and dunk. And so I think the important thing, though, was seeing Bryce get back to being Bryce. And I know he's much maligned throughout college football. It's kind of the Michigan effect in a lot of ways. I remember, it's funny because it ended up being a prophecy, essentially. I didn't go to the USC game. I stayed home and watched it, much like I'm going to do this Maryland game. And the color commentator, I can't remember which guy it was, is like, yeah, Bryce is just making, he's very inaccurate. He's making all these freshman mistakes. I'm like, did you do any homework or research? Because Bryce is not inaccurate. Just because his completion percentage isn't as high, it's like, you ask any Michigan fan, they'll know the answer why. It's because he's throwing good balls, but the receivers are not coming down with them. And then after that, then he started getting happy feet and not being comfortable in his pass protections. And, from kind of that second quarter against Michigan State forward, up and, it was really just a 2-game stretch there. I think against Northwestern, I think that was a positive step, where that play in and of itself that you're talking about, Bryce knew he was going to get drilled as he's rolling out, sprinting to his left, and still making that play. Like, he's running right towards where the guy's going to hit him, and he still makes that play. And he made that a couple times against Northwestern. I think the most important part of that connection is that it happened against I think Northwestern had the 18th ranked pass defense in the country. They'd only given up, I think, over 200 yards once all season. And it was just over 300 to USC. And Michigan was just 28-ish yards shy of USC's mark. And who would have thought at any point in the season, given what we've seen from USC, that the Michigan pass game would be in that same conversation against a defense that had basically held everybody to 200 yards or less through the air. So I was kind of surprised, just because I said all week last week, I want to see them kind of force Bryce into that situation, kind of what you used to see Jim Harbaugh do. I think back to Nebraska. I do not know what just fell, but something fell out there. My dog's going nuts. And here she comes. I don't know what it was that I think it was Nebraska had like one of the top pass defenses in 2023, and Michigan came out throwing against Penn State in 2022. Michigan was going up against the Penn State team that had the number one run defense at the time and came out running. I wanted to see Michigan kind of get back to that type of ideal of you're really good at this thing, and we, don't necessarily show that we're really good at this thing, but we're going to do the thing that you're good at stopping. And for them to do that against Northwestern, I mean, it isn't the same caliber, right? I think, also Ohio State 2019, I know Michigan didn't win that game and they lost handily, but I mean, Shea Patterson threw for 300 yards against the number one pass defense. You want to be able to see them do things well against what, that they maybe don't look like they're good at throughout the year, that other teams are great at stopping. And I think that was the positive thing. Now, obviously, the big downer there is that Michigan should have won that game by 30. And with the 5 turnovers lost, they won by a walk-off field goal. Defense did its job, but like the mixture of the 5 turnovers and 2 missed field goals, Michigan's, in a bad spot there. They can't be that in 2 weeks, not 8 days, whatever it is. So it's interesting to see, though, that they kind of get that version of a killer instinct and that it's coming from two true freshmen. I think that shows a lot of moxie, because you wouldn't expect 2 true freshmen to be able to have that type of rapport enough in a big time moment to make those types of plays.
Isaiah Hull, Wolverines Wire, Locked On Wolverines. Those are your destinations for Michigan football coverage from Isaiah every day. And Isaiah, hopefully we can get together next week. And also, Isaiah, anything that you need in regards to anything we can do for you here at the Voice of College Football, we know that you're a friend and a first-class guy, and everything that you support by way of things more important than football, certainly we are here for you. So thanks for taking your time. You're always gracious with your time. Appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thank you. And God bless you, Mark.
God bless you, Isaiah. The great Isaiah Hull, Wolverines Wire. Again, Locked On Wolverines. I want to remind everyone that we've got Michigan shows on Tuesday and Thursday over on the Michigan channel. So that's Wolverines Live and the call-in show on Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then the post-game show is after directly the Maryland game. I don't remember who's got that game or at what time, whatever. I have yet to really look at the schedule coming up. I'll be back at 10 p.m. Eastern time, or more precisely. I do kind of want to see Florida State and North Carolina State. I know 5-5 versus 5-5. It's meaningless. They both suck. I get it. But we will probably be on live after the game, unless it's a blowout. We'll pop on at some point tonight here at the Voice of College Football and take your calls on week 13. And keep in mind that the Amazon links in the description section of this video and all the videos when you shop on Amazon. Please use the link that we provide. It makes all the difference in the world to keep us going. So once again, the Amazon link, it's been posted both by We Appreciate Jackson. There it is. The Amazon links in the description section as well. Also in the chat. Please use it when you shop on Amazon to keep us going here at the Voice of College Football. And we will see you tonight after Florida State, NC State. Also, I should note, because we've got a Michigan contingent here, Steve Dace is live with us next Tuesday, 6:30 Eastern. Steve Dace live with myself, Corey Bratta. That's next Tuesday at 6:30 Eastern right here. See you tonight.